Or project is you're going to add something called a get ignore file, and you're going to add your node modules to that file. So let me show you how to do that. Oops. So you're in your directory, and you're going to touch a .get ignore file. Yes, thank you. When you create a get ignore file, you're telling the things, you say the things that are in this file, I don't want you to upload all of that to GitHub. So when you have node modules, you have lots and lots of files and code in your repository or in your directory. You don't want to push those things up to GitHub, because if somebody is working with your project and they fork and clone it, when they run npm install, npm will look in your package.json file and it will download all of those dependencies. You don't want people to pull all of that code from your GitHub repo. So in your get ignore file, you can ignore anything, but we're going to ignore node modules. So the way that you use a get ignore file is you just state the name of the files. Can you blow that up? Yes.
Just one per line, basically.
One per line. Yeah, so if I was ignoring one of these directories, I'd say also ignore 3 setting. We often ignore environment variables. We'll learn about those later. So what you want is a get ignore file, and in your get ignore file, you're going to ignore your node modules. When you have a get ignore file with node modules, just put your hand on your head. All right. Critical mass for me is 80%. I think we're good to go. So let's look back at these instructions. Create a project and initialize a Git repository, check. Add a Git ignore file and add your node modules, check. Push your code up to GitHub. So let me get into the repo that I want to work in. It's in quarter 2. It's called oh, that's not the one I want. Well, that'll work actually. All right, thumbs up if you've got your repo up on GitHub. Okay, looks like we need a little bit more time for that. Of course.
I pushed my project before this,
Mm-hmm.
so my node modules were pushed. And so now, what?
That's a great question. So I accidentally pushed my node modules up to GitHub. What do I do?
Yeah, so I did the same.
I did that this morning. Guess what I did? I Googled how to remove node modules from a GitHub repo, so let's do that now. Remove node modules from GitHub. See, it just fills in automatically on my search bar. So the very first result gives you 3 commands that will take care of that.
Okay.
So look that up, run those commands. All right, so if I look back at my list of steps, we were on this one, push your code up to GitHub. I should add one, and I'll add this later, but I just want to make sure that my server is working locally. So I have the server code. The file is called server.js. What command will I run in my terminal to spin up that server? You can just shout it out. What command am I going to run in my terminal? Yes, so the file's called server.js, so I'm going to do node server.js. Okay, and then don't shout it out. Just think about how am I going to test to see if it's working. The port I have assigned is 8080. Turn and talk to your neighbor and explain how will I test to see if my server is actually working. All right, finish up your conversation. How am I going to test my server to see if it's working? Jasmine. Yep, localhost 8080. And let's see, does this match my code? So when I request the path to just /, I'm getting a JSON object. There's also this route where if I say /hello /name, I should see this response. Let's check and make sure that's working. So /hello /name. It says hello Kim. Let's make sure it works for other people. We'll do Matt. Hello Matt. Okay, so all of my code is working locally as I would expect. So I'm going to kill my server. Let's go back and see what the list says. So I'm going to add something there that says test locally to make sure that your code is working as expected. So that's the big step. Number one is preparing your project. So take a look at those steps. Remember the fourth step, which is to test your code locally. And how would you explain that step in your own words? It's really simple. Turn and talk with someone who you didn't talk to last time. How do you prepare your project to deploy it to Heroku? All right, I hear a very thorough explanation of the steps from this back corner. So, Casey, do I have your name correct?
Yes.
Okay. Casey, will you tell us how do you prepare a project to deploy it to Heroku?
Sure. So first, you make sure that it's got a repo for it.
Cool.
GitHub style.
So you want both, you want to initialize the Git repository and you want to have it up on GitHub.
Do all the GitHub things.
Do all the GitHub things.
Then you ignore the node modules.
Excellent. I like the language that you're using. You said ignore the node modules. He didn't say create a git ignore file and then ignore them, but that's what that means. Excellent.
And then run node in your terminal,
Mm-hmm.
and then you go to the browser and locally run the app.js.
Yep. And then you just test your code locally to make sure that it's working. So I just initialized a Git repo. I accidentally added all of my node modules. That's okay. Let's see. Let me add my git remote, add origin here. And I'll do git push origin master. If you forget your git ignore file, no problem. You just Google like remove node modules from GitHub. Did it and it worked. Yes, this is one of my favorite code snippets. So I'm going to run that. And then this git push origin master. And then I'm going to run node server.js and just make sure I didn't break anything. So I'm on localhost 8080. Looks like it's working. All right. Cool. So now let's get into how we start deploying to Heroku. So it says deploy to Heroku. First thing is to sign up and log into Heroku in the browser. You just need an account on Heroku. I think you all did that beforehand. The second thing is install the Heroku command line tool, command line interface. The third thing is to log into Heroku from the command line. The command that you use is Heroku login. So if I do Heroku login, oh, I think my server's still running. Heroku login. It says enter your Heroku credentials and then your password. And so if you're someone like me, I do some development work at work and I do some development work personally. I'll log in. I have different accounts for my personal stuff and my work stuff. So that's one way to think about using your credentials. So thumbs up when you are logged into Heroku on the command line. How about this table? Not yet, okay. Also, if you are like, I think I can follow these instructions on my own, I don't want to be in here, you are welcome to leave. We really want to encourage you to take personalized learning when you need it. If this makes a lot of intuitive sense to you and you can blast through it, please don't feel obligated to stay in the classroom. All right, so we logged into Heroku from the command line. We did Heroku login. Now I'm going to run a command. It's git remote -v. And I just want to see what remotes, like what URLs am I pointing to right now. And so when I do git remote -v, I see a remote named origin, and it's pointing to a GitHub URL. So right now, when I do git push origin master, it pushes my code up to this URL. And what we're about to do with the next command is we're going to create a new remote, and it's going to point to Heroku. And so the command that we use is Heroku create. So you want to make sure that you're in the directory that you want to deploy to Heroku, and you do Heroku create. So what I see on the screen is it says creating app and then done, and then Heroku will auto-generate a name for you. It's usually like an adjective and a noun and then a number. So I got Mighty Meadow 77999. Anybody get a really good auto-generated name?
Limitless depths.
Oh, that's a good one. Limitless depths. Hidden facing. Bubbly guts. And so now Heroku is telling me when your app deploys, this is going to be the URL it gets deployed to, and the remote that you're pushing to is this remote. So we've added a new remote. So if I up arrow to the git remote v command, I want you to do that. I want you to figure out why is there two more remotes there and what are they pointing to? Yeah, you can remove remotes. So the question is, what are these two new remotes after running git remote -v? Turn and talk with somebody next to you. What are those two new remotes? It's okay if you're like, I have no idea.
Yeah.
But this is but it's actually a Roku. Get it. Oh, okay. Okay.
It's not good time.
You have a Heroku.
I mean, it's version control. It's in version control.
Doesn't matter what.
Remote as all right. You can either see that now, or we can wait till we have a pause.
All right, so at first I had the remotes called Origin. Now I have remotes called Origin and called Heroku. What are those new remotes? A volunteer. Like Yusuf and Eric, I heard you having a good discussion about it. What are those? What are these two new things?
Our guess,
I like guesses.
Yeah, we get like this another Git server and it's not a GitHub, but it's a Git in heroku.
version control.
Yes.
Another version control.
Yep.
Can you guys hold on, or take it outside?
I was trying to help her. Her remote's not working.
That's fine. Just pause or take it outside. So yes, what you said is that it's Git. You have a new remote. You use Git to create a new remote. This remote is called Heroku. And so now we have different Git commands where we can either push to our GitHub repository, which we call Origin, or we can push to our Heroku repository, which is called Heroku. So we just did Heroku create. Now we actually want to push our code up to Heroku, and you do git push Heroku master. It's a very similar, it's the same command, git push, but you're just pushing it to a different remote. So git push Heroku master. yes. Cody asked a good question with the different remotes. Is that like when you have different branches? Yes, if you start using a lot of branches off of one repo, you'll start pushing to those different remotes. So let's take a look at your command line. No, that's not interesting.
Yeah, well, they just released a new one.
I don't know where the create and having a few people who are having the same problems.
Applications.
What if mine says fail source?
Your app should not have deployed correctly. That was by design.
Gotcha.
Yep, it's got, there's two steps we have to do. So Heroku has a convenient command to open your deployed app from the command line. So if you do Heroku open, it will take you to that URL. Got Mighty Meadow. This is exciting. I can't wait to see it.
Oh, but you're gonna have
So are you getting an application error screen?
Yes.
Looks like I'm still spinning, so I'm not getting that. So this is what happens with Heroku. You very rarely do it perfectly the first time, and that's okay because Heroku provides us a lot of tools for debugging. And so the main tool for debugging Heroku is to use Heroku logs. You can print all of the logs, or you can print just the most pertinent information, and you add the flag --tail to get just the pertinent information. I'm really spinning out here. Okay. So this is a ton of visual information. Let's just go through it and see if there's something I can Google. So the first line, it says initial release by user, my name. No, that's not it. Release version 2, release version 1, enable logplex by user, build started, scaled, deploy, release version 3. It says starting process with command npm start. All right, build succeeded. Looks like it's trying to start my app with Node server.js. And then it says error R10. Boot timeout, web process failed to bind, $port. So this is probably something I can Google, so I'm going to Google search that right now.
Start.
I don't know if you have the same error I do. You probably have a different error. Does anybody know what my error is after Googling or has a similar error? All right, let's pause and debug my error, and then there's a second step, which is probably the error that you're hitting. So went to Stack Overflow. Someone was asking about the same error message, and then I go down. In Stack Overflow, I always look for the green check mark. That's what's been upvoted the most. It says, Heroku dynamically assigns your app a port, so you can't set the port to a fixed number. Oh, wait, if I look back at my code, my port is 8080. I'm trying to say you must use the port 8080. It doesn't sound like Heroku can handle that. Heroku adds the ports to the environment so you can pull it from there. So I need to switch my listen to process.env.port or my port number. So I'm literally going to copy that. So my port, when it's deployed to Heroku, Heroku decides the port number. When I'm running it locally, if it can't find that port, I want to run 8080. So I'm going to make this change. I'm going to commit my changes to GitHub first. So git commit added dynamic port. Ugh, that's not what I wanted. That's all right. I'll undo it later. So after I push up to GitHub, this is an important workflow thing to get into. Then I do git push Heroku master. So I made a commit, I pushed it up to GitHub. Now I'm pushing that same commit up to Heroku. So it's going to rebuild all of that.
There are tools out there that will do it both for you, or?
Yes, you can. I think in GitHub you can set up whenever you make a commit to your GitHub repository, it will also make that push to Heroku. It's a good question. All right, so I'm going to do Heroku open. Let's see if either it deployed or I get a different error. Hey, mine deployed. All right, did yours deploy? All right, your job for the next 5 minutes is you're going to use Heroku logs --tail. You're going to try and find an error message that you can Google and try and solve your problem. If you don't solve it by the end of that 5 minutes, that's totally fine. But give it a try. So, the thing with Heroku logs is you have to figure out which is your which is the error that's going to give you the most information.
Murder your you're friends with the Oh, true. Alright, so
I don't know,
you gotta express these falls. So basically, I think this is so.
assuming that.
So you're gonna need to add.
No, I didn't add some.
Do the add.
Maybe. Potentially. So if you up arrow and then do get pusher and master.
I went to a different one. I did the calculator one. I just did another one, you know. It's still zero.
Copy's still waiting on it.
Yeah.
Go with the heroku.
I'll try. Yeah. I'll try to push it.
No, it's not.
No. You call it earlier. So what's gonna be?
It's weird.
Yes,
Otherwise,
so.
Like express.
They're-
So well, fair enough. We don't know how we have to.
Yes, Cody.
This is what the calculations were. Now. So. Yeah.
oh yeah,
And him is because
when you leave out that
So,
maybe now.
for my parents, code.
So dash line is
That's like one.
Yeah.
All
that.
maybe that's right on
Go to your. Yeah.
So usually that's the start script.
Just change the name.
Yeah.
So you have to tell them what.
Yeah.
Save it, push it, see if that works.
So type in slash, just type it. Slash.
All right, the timer is going to be at 0 in just a little bit. I would like someone who has an unsolved problem to come up and we'll mob debug together. So, a volunteer.
I will volunteer.
All right, we'll have you come up.
I have no idea what I'm looking at.